You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and commentator Alex Andreou and the barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. Welcome both. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Prime Minister warns the BBC over the biggest licence fee increase for 40 years. That's on the Daily Mirror. Rishi Sunak is expected to block the 9% licence increase and says the corporation has to be realistic about what the public can afford, the Telegraph reports. The Eye says the Conservatives are losing voters to Nigel Farage over high migration. But new Tory chair Richard Holden says don't write us off as the Conservatives plan for an election battle. That's on the front page of the Express. Labour will not turn on the spending taps if it wins the next election. That's what Sir Keir Starmer is expected to say in a speech tomorrow, according to The Guardian. On the front of the Mirror, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer faces a backlash after praising former Conservative Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. The Sun says that rail union bosses held a Christmas party on the same day that a week of strike action began. The Metro has a story concerning hackers' reported threats to the royal family. And the Star reports on the wintry weather conditions affecting what it calls Skate Britain. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Alex Andreou and Anna Soubry. Welcome to you both. Let's start by having a look at the Express. This is an interview done with the party new Tory chairman, and he's revealed that the Conservatives are on a war footing and don't write them off just yet. Anna.
Well, stand by now for the next 12 months. Going to drive everybody absolutely bonkers, but the starting pistol pretty much has been fired for the next general election, which has to take place in the next 12 months. This is the new chair of the Conservative Party, Richard Holden, a man actually looking for a seat, but that's another story. And he's saying, you know, if we can take a snap election at any time because we're going to win. And he's very upbeat, as you might expect. And many of us might say that he's grasping at every straw that's going, because, in fact, the Tories' chances of winning the next election are not looking very good.
Well, he's claiming that an historic fifth term is within our grasp. Yes. What say you, Alex?
It's not, but... it's not, but a friend of mine was saying that the terrible problem for political journalists and columnists in the last 2 years is that with the Conservatives pretty much consistently 20 points behind Labour, what are they going to do? Are they going to write every day, every week, the piece that says Labour will definitely win the next election? Of course not. So they find ever more imaginative ways of saying there's still a chance, you know, with a following wind, and if you tilt your head to the side a little bit. But, you know, he's doing his job as a party chairman. That's what you would expect him to say, and that is indeed what he's saying.
Yes, yes. He's not going to talk their chances down,
no.
is he?
He's not going to say, actually, it's all pretty ghastly and grim and we're going to lose. And rightly so.
Let's turn to the Eye, which is suggesting that actually the Conservatives are losing ground to Nigel Farage.
Well, this is an interesting...
What do we think of this one?
This is a very interesting story, actually, because... You see, the debate goes as follows, having obviously been a long-standing member of the Conservative Party, there will be... This really is about the factions and the division in the Conservative Party, because there's a large group, much larger than in the past, on the right of the party. Some of them are looking at, our MPs, looking at their own seats, and they may have majorities of 25, 30,000, saying, oh, there's a very slight chance I might lose my majority because Nigel Farage and that party, which is now called Reform, which is the old UKIP, the Brexit party, is, they claim, polling at such a level that they are going to take votes from the Conservatives come the next general election, and that will be the cause of the loss. I think there are flaws in this argument. One, I'm actually not convinced that it's 15%, or I think actually
11%,
they say 11. There are other reports it's 15. I'm not so sure about that. But in any event, actually the reality is, every time the Conservative Party decides that it's going to go more to the right and say something more that way inclined, it probably, for every one vote it either shores up, it loses 2 from those other seats where more liberal, sensible Conservatives, I would say, are appalled at that sort of right-wing rhetoric, and they will vote Labour or for the Lib Dems.
I mean, I think this is a lesson in politics, in that if you create a hostage to fortune, you better have a way of resolving it. For 2 years now, the Conservatives have made immigration their absolutely top issue. Small boats crossing, if you look at polling from 2 years ago, was nowhere even in the top 10 of people's issues. And it's now at number 3, below the economy and the NHS. So having made something a really hot issue, how do you do that without having a way of resolving it? How do you make one of your 5 pledges, I'm going to stop the boats, without a plan for actually doing it?
And you see, this last line here, Conservative MPs increasingly concerned by the PM's ability to appeal to right-wing voters, with one telling the Eye, it's hardly surprising that more voters are turning towards Reform UK. That, if I may say, probably better supported, but I would say, trying to say not particularly well. Conservative MPs? No. A certain faction of Conservative MPs are saying that. It's really about an attack on Rishi Sunak, saying that he's not the man that can win the next election for them. And some of that will be people with an eye onto who is going to be his successor after they lose the next general election. But you should never write off parties like Reform UK. But I think under their current leadership, they would not get anywhere near this. They need to have what I think is the ghastly Farage to come back in order to stand a chance of getting anywhere near.
And also,
no, it's just to speak to your point that they have sort of set the agenda. That what the piece is saying, the majority of Tory voters say reducing migration from its current level of 672,000 should be prioritised over growing the economy even.
I mean, like I said, if that's how you set out your stall, you then need a plan to deliver that. It's not how I would set out my stall as a politician, because, you know, it's a game that leads to losses, economic losses. So and that is always voters' number 1 issue. So if you end up fixing issue 3 by making their concerns about issue 1 worse, you're snookered. And that's the situation they seem to have managed to engineer.
Interesting.
When I was an MP, the one thing that really struck me, remember I was a proper marginal Labour Conservative seat, was that when you knocked on doors, and we would do our own little polling, obviously, and we would do surveys, actually immigration was not up there. But as soon as somebody blew the dog whistle, and this is why Alex's point is so absolutely spot on, then those priorities changed. I genuinely believe that for the majority of British people, overwhelmingly, they're concerned about the cost of living, concerned about the NHS and other public services. And if you make the case on immigration and you explain about the boats and so on and so forth and all the difficulties of it, actually it would drop off down the agenda because they would understand the complexity of it, and that dog whistle would not be
very,
as loud.
very interesting analysis. Let's move on, though, to talk about Labour and Sir Keir Starmer mentioning Margaret Thatcher in a speech, much to the shame of some of his party members. Alex, what do you think of that?
I mean, I think the point he was making is not the point that's been picked up here, to be honest. He wasn't saying that he agreed with Thatcher's policies. He was saying that there are prime ministers that you look at them and they have a legacy. They went in with an ideology and a mission, and they delivered it. They changed the country. And whether you agree with Thatcher or not, she did do that. Whether you agree with Blair or not, he did do that.
His actual words is that she brought about meaningful change.
Yes.
Which is true.
I mean, she changed the country.
What has happened to this country that people can't actually pay tribute to people, even if you fundamentally disagree with them? I mean, I fundamentally disagreed with Arthur Scargill, but I'd be the first person to say he was the most brilliant orator, and he did prick many people's consciences. But you cannot underestimate what Thatcher achieved in our country. Yes, I think she went rather mad at the end and she did some dreadful things. She was the first woman Prime Minister. That in itself was a considerable achievement. And obviously I'm old enough to remember the 1970s. And she reformed our country when it came to the overbearing power that the trade union movement had. And I'm from Worksop in North Nottinghamshire, which is a pit town, so I've got a little bit of understanding and insight into this. And some of the things that she did undoubtedly were the right things for our country at that time. She did a lot of other things that were wrong, but I think this has just been... I'm really shocked at the
And a lot of things that seemed right at the time, but in the fullness of time have turned out to not be right. Like, we see now what's happening with water utility companies.
True, that is
and there is a question as to whether privatising things that are natural monopolies was ever a really good idea. So some of the things that she did, the legacy has, you know, the sheen has come off that legacy.
But very quickly, you...
But all Starmer is saying is she was an impactful Prime Minister, and I would quite like to also be an impactful
So you defended
Prime
his
Minister.
right to basically...
Well, no, because, I mean, you could foresee this front page, so I still think it's politically naive to say that, because you absolutely know how it will be.
No, I blame the Mirror, sorry. I think the Mirror's got it wrong.
Division of opinion there. Anna and Alex, thank you very much for the moment. Coming up, the Prime Minister reportedly tells the BBC to cut costs so it won't have to implement a steep licence fee increase next year. We'll discuss that next. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Alex Andreou and Anna Soubry. Let's kick off with a look at The Guardian. Still talking about Labour, and this time their spending plans, or not, as it were, Anna.
Well, I think this is the line, isn't it? When they are trailing this speech that he's going to be giving tomorrow to the Resolution Foundation, when Starmer's reported as going to be saying anyone who expects an incoming Labour government to quickly turn on the spending taps is going to be disappointed. And that's because the simple reality is we don't have the money. So we are more highly taxed than we've been for, at least 40 years. We've got incredibly high taxation. And although, obviously, our public services are screaming out for more money, I think this shows Starmer being open and honest about the real situation that he hopefully is going to inherit, in the sense that he will be the Prime Minister, but they will not have the money in order to fund public services until we grow the economy. And that is the only way we are going to get to the situation where we can fund our public services in the way that we need to.
And Alex,
this is a bold thing for him to say, but it's honest.
One of the quotes from the speech that he's going to give is never before has a British government asked its people to pay so much for so little.
Well, I think that actually is the point. Because if you look at international comparators, our tax burden, as it tends to be called, which is really a tax share compared to GDP, is mid to low range, actually, if you compare it to France or Germany. So it's not like we're taxing more than anyone else in the world. We're just taxing historically high levels for the UK. And the problem is that we're also seeing crumbling public services at the same time, which makes people very, very grumpy, because the natural question is, where's my money going? Why am I paying more and getting less in return? Which is a fair question for a voter, right? So, I mean, yes, I can't remember the last time anyone went into an election hoping to become government and said, I will turn on the spending taps. Like, literally, the leading candidate in most elections manages expectations and says, don't expect me to fund everything now.
Except that in 97,
on day one,
of course, Tony Blair inherited, for whatever the failings of the Conservatives in 97, which is why they lost the election, the economy, under the great stewardship of Ken Clarke, who'd been the Conservative Chancellor, was actually in really good, a hugely better position than the one that Starmer will inherit. And therefore, all Blair had to do was just carry on, in effect, with more of the same. This is very different. We don't want
Very
more
different
of the same.
times.
It is very
It is
different.
very
yeah.
different.
I don't think anybody wants more of the same, do they? Let's quickly look at the Daily Mail and Rishi Sunak's utterings on the licence fee, that they potentially will not, the BBC will not have the traditional hike in the licence fee. Why so?
It really is election time, isn't it? When the stories about cutting the BBC licence fee start coming out. I mean, he's just saying, look, we're in a difficult position, everyone has to make savings, and so will you, which in my mind goes without saying, especially with inflation being the way it is. You know, they're a purchaser of services, BBC, like any big organisation. They will be very aware that their money is not going as far as it used to. But, you know, it's something that pleases a particular demographic of Conservative voters and a particular demographic of Daily Mail readers to say, BBC, we're going to be tough on it. And so that's what Sunak is saying. Again, not very surprising.
And the licence fee has been frozen for 2 years, so stands to reason that it's something to look at. Now, we'll just move on to the next story because we're running out of time. The COVID inquiry, due to hear from Boris Johnson tomorrow.
Absolutely. Excellent piece in the Daily Mirror where it very helpfully sets out the 10 questions he has to face.
Sorry, Wednesday, Thursday, he's...
I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
it's a non-sitting day tomorrow and Tuesday
Of
for
course
some
it is.
reason.
They're back on Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesday.
I have the feeling that that's probably where Simon Case was slotted in. But because he's been unwell,
he's
I
not
think they're now two blank.
Anyway, it's Wednesday's the day.
Wednesday and Thursday.
And Thursday,
yeah.
that Boris Johnson is going to be cross-examined beautifully and ably by the inquiry's chief interrogator. And they have set out the 10 questions very helpfully. Obviously, I won't go through them all, but it is going to be very interesting to see what answers he's going to give to these and the many other questions that he will probably be asked when he has to give his evidence on oath to the inquiry. I mean, if people have the time to watch it, it's been an extraordinary experience to see people being properly questioned in a proper way, in a respectful way, but with other people's evidence being put to them, which is what barristers do.
Yeah.
And it will be very interesting to see how Johnson conducts himself.
Yes, Alex, what are your thoughts on that? We've got about 30 seconds.
Question 2, I think, is the only one that matters, and it's the one that will be very difficult to answer,
Yes,
which is...
good point.
You made the mistakes you made in March 2020 because it was a very novel situation. Why did you make the same mistakes in autumn 2020?
Be very interesting to see.
Very hard to answer that.
Thank you both for the moment. We'll see you in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.